The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. Hi, my name is David Del Campo, and I am a staff member here with DFSS in the IT department. I am a organizer for today's webinar for this FY2021 cost of living adjustment. Today we have presenter Glenn Lazan, and also from DFSS we have Jackie Tiema and Tiffany Junkins that'll be joining us as well. Just want to remind everybody that throughout the presentation, as you come up with any questions, feel free to type your questions in using the question box. Want to remind everybody that we have everybody muted just to control the sound. So the only people that are allowed to speak are our DFSS staff. So remember, use the question box, and at the end of the presentation, we will cover those questions. So without any further ado, I will hand the presentation over to Glenn Lazan.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone, and we want to thank everyone for being here and participating. We started just a few minutes later because we know that there are still attendees that are joining, and at 10 o'clock, not everyone had logged on, so we wanted to try to maximize as much as possible. But there are still folks that will be joining. So just letting everyone know, too, that this presentation will be recorded, and then we will post it, and we will also provide a link then for everyone, all the attendees, everyone that's registered, and if anyone wasn't able to be part of this, they'll be able to access it later. So again, thanks, David. My name's Glenn Lazan. I'm Director of Accounting here at DFSS, and I'm over the Children's Services portfolio of grants. And so also with me is Jackie Tiema Massey, who is Director of Grants as part of the DFSS Grants Unit, and Tiffany Junkins, Manager of Family Support Programs in the Children's Services Division. So we'll be here to share some things regarding the COLA grant application and assess your questions and present our information. So again, noting that working with our community partners, we at DFSS connect with Chicago residents and families and resources that build stability, support well-being, and empower to thrive. We are, as you know, a service, and we want to make sure that we can be part of the betterment of all of Chicago's families and their children. So, as you know, we are always here to support you in your mission and in the work and services that you provide. Our agenda today will be the welcome and introductions, which we've just done, our overview of the cost of living adjustment, detailed application instructions. So we'll review the budget narrative, fiscal attachments, and the wage study and fringe, run through the templates, and then we will also discuss the program governance approvals that are required as part of your grant submission, and go through those templates, technical assistance options, and contact information and questions. So we will go through those things. So overview of COLA. Before I proceed on this, I just want to share that, of course, everyone should have received our mailing this week that provided your COLA allocations for the budgets, all of the grants that you presently have, be they Head Start, Early Head Start Partnership, or the Early Head Start Expansion Grant. And along with the COLA award allocation were the instructions to complete your COLA budget narrative, the wage survey and fringe survey, the instructions for that, and your program governance. So a lot of information was attached on one email. So hopefully everyone has received those. We haven't received any questions from the community at large saying that someone didn't receive anything. So hopefully that's all in everyone's hands. Where Head Start funds originate, just a little bit of a background slide here again. United States Congress, and there are then the President will sign the act to increase our services. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the ACF Office of Head Start, provides the funds to us, to the city of Chicago, the Department of Family and Support Services, which is what we are, and then we in turn work with our delegate agencies to administer those funds, provide the funds to you as a grantee that we are, and then working with our delegate agencies to work with you on our Head Start grants, as well as any additional supplemental funding, such as the COLA or on the CARES Act for those monies that were received. So back in December, the president had signed this, that there would be the COLA award forthcoming, and this is what we are presently working with right now. So out of that came a 1.22% increase over the current FY21 contract amounts to be used to permanently increase staff salaries by no less than 1.22%, permanently increase full Head Start pay scales, cover higher fringe benefit costs associated with increased salaries, provide no less than 1.22% increase to all partner agencies, if applicable, if an agency has those, and to offset increased operating costs, i.e. higher rents, utilities, and supplies. So while it's easy to say those statements on one screen, there's a lot of work involved behind that. COLA grant application that meets the needs of the reviewers too. And that's something really important that we need to consider, is that the responses that our delegate agencies provide meet for the first time, to know what your agency is about, why you are meeting the requirements of the COLA application, that you're documenting the increases to the staff appropriately as per the guidelines that are provided, and as well as fringe benefits and any other related costs. Section 640 there, Head Start Act requires compensation of Head Start employees must be improved regardless of whether the agency has the ability to improve the compensation of non-Head Start staff employed by the agency. So that's a requirement that it be an across-the-board application of the increase. The Act also restricts compensation to an employee that is higher than the average rate of compensation for substantially comparable services in the area where the program is operating. Little proviso here, which I'll go into in a second. However, delegates with concerns that staff salaries cannot be increased due to wage comparability issues should ensure that public school salaries for kindergarten teachers are included in those considerations. So we sent a separate email this week and provided for you the wages for teachers in the Chicago public school system, as well as staff also too, so that you could also consider this and take this into account when you're working on your COLA application to see where does it fit in line and how does it measure against the Chicago public school system too. So that's a very important factor that we've been emphasizing in the last year COLA grant application, as well as in this year's COLA grant application, that that needs to be brought into the consideration. FY21 COLA delegate agency application process. So let me just go back here for a second. So within the documents you received this week, there were sections 1 and 2. Section 1 spoke to the attachment A, and it's labeled as such, attachment A, the draft budget narratives and applicable fiscal attachments, and attachment A.1, which was the wage and fringe survey, and that's a separate Excel attachment. Again, that's due next week, Friday, April the 2nd, via email, as noted on there. Section 2 discusses attachments C.1 through 10, and that's documenting board and parent policy committee approvals of your grant applications. We'll be going through that also today. And that's due by Friday, April the 9th, so a week later on that. We know that this year is a bit shorter of a turnaround time than we may have had in prior years, and we recognize that fact that it's an accelerated process. It is along the timelines that have been provided to us. So we have a really tight turnaround. We don't have the luxury of having a lot of time, unfortunately, because that would always be a plus. But we do have to have this submitted at April 15th. So given the timelines we've backed into here, we have to still review the applications, and then we also have to discuss issues and questions with your application so that we can reach a final approval, give you the go-ahead then to submit the approval from your board and parent council. So as you know, there's a long process ahead and a lot that we have to do to go through this. Again, FY21 grant applications, key documents for application development, things I discussed earlier. You were provided the funding letters this week. You were provided the grant application instruction manual, the attachment A, which was the budget and budget narrative, attachment A.1, the wage study, and attachment C are the approval templates. And note any additional required attachments in each section to be provided by your agency as needed. So section 1, budget and budget narrative, attachments A. The budget and budget narrative is an Excel file issued with instructions and the funding letter. Develop COLA budget using the cover page, detailed salaries, personnel, and non-personnel tabs. And we'll be going through that in a little bit. Data from these tabs will flow into the budget narrative tab for COLA. And then we also ask that you follow the detailed instructions that are on the pages. And I'm going to emphasize again, one of the facts that I've seen through our review of the budget applications, I ask, please do follow the instructions very carefully. Please don't just skim them, because if it's a rushed submission, we'll still be coming back to you for further clarifications, and it will just elongate and delay the process. So we do ask that you read every little nuance on our instructions, because there is a reason why they're in there. And there's a reason why we may be asking for a bit of information too. So it's not just superfluous, but it's needed as part of the total application. Notes on federal match. Due to COVID-19 and the challenges in meeting the non-federal match, DFSS is requesting a waiver for all non-federal match for the Head Start, Early Head Start partnership and the expansion COLA applications, and that means that you're not required to budget any non-federal match in your COLA applications. So as you know too, from the FY21 grant application that we submitted last year and the budgets that we're applying this COLA against, we took the same approach too, due to the COVID challenges that were provided throughout the year, and all of our agencies being able to provide non-federal match through whatever means, be it volunteers or any other type of ability to meet that, has been restricted throughout this last year. So the same will apply to your COLA application. Okay, demonstration, attachment A. So right now I'm going to bring up the budget form that everyone received, and we'll walk through that. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this at this moment. It may be small, but in terms of the specifics, I think rather than focusing on the lines, let's just look at the form itself, and I'll just enlarge that just a bit and what's on there. So looking at the cover page, we'll just walk through this and highlight some of the main areas and all of the different tabs that flow through. So as you know, those that complete your grant application budgets, the format itself is comparable to what we do for our grant application budgets. So it asks for the demographic information for your particular agency, and also denoting in the appropriate box that's shaded there in yellow on the right-hand side, which program specifically you're providing this for. So again, we need to remember that every application, every budget has to have a specific application for the respective grant program. It may be an obvious point, but it is something that's very specific. So it will that will flow through the rest of the schedule, so be sure to denote that on there. Other demographic information as need be. Data on here, again, those that are very familiar with the format itself, it's an Excel sheet that's that has flow-through formulas that will carry the information that you enter throughout the respective schedules, as well as also through your COLA budget narrative. We'll get to that in a minute, but there's some specifics regarding the budget narrative, of course, that we need to address too. Also, know that if there are particular areas in your budget form itself that you need modifications to, and it's locked such that you can't make a change readily for whatever particular circumstance might be, please reach out to us and we'll make the appropriate change for you, open up the cell or the page, whatever may be needed to fit your need, and make sure that you can respond appropriately when completing the particular budget schedule or the section of the information you need, i.e. knowing you're not restricted just to make it work in there. We'll make it work with you and for you, because it has to be right. So again, COLA grant is due Friday, April 2nd. Got ahead of myself, I hope. All right, so we'll review the next tabs. Again, looking at the sample here, the columns flow across employee name, the title, which draws from the personnel tab on column B, which is the next tab there. Just highlight over there for a second. The function, the agency title for that position. Scroll across here a little. Column 5, the current rate for the pay period or per hour, number of pay periods or hours. Again, column 7, current gross annualized salaries, percent of time spent on the federal fund, this particular grant that you're doing the application for, and that'll compute the requested COLA amount. And so then, again, this is formula driven, and it crosses and computes right on there. So notes on here, samples, please remove. We provide some of that just so that you could see the flow of the information, because one of the important things always is that when you're completing any form, that you see not just the theory but the actual flow of the information, because as I've seen myself in any experience, if you don't see why the schedule flows and what you're trying to achieve on it, then the mechanics really are meaningless, because you don't know what your end result is going to be. And so this is what you need to approach and walk through slowly when you're working on the application. Each one of these will come back here across, is meant to compute your COLA amount on the salaries. So that's part 1 of what the requirement is. So work from your current budget and using the staff, the salaries, the positions that you currently have. That's your starting point. So you're not starting from raw information. You may have some changes that you need to incorporate into there, but you already have on your existing grant, you have a template to use when you're completing the COLA budget to work from, and transfer that respective information as applicable, as appropriate, onto the schedules, and it'll move along. Again, please be sure that you also have maybe the instructions side by side when you're going through this. While some of it is intuitive, other steps in the process may have a may be tricky, or may have some subtle nuance that needs to be addressed also too. So please be sure to be referring and cross-referencing the instructions that were provided for you for any type of issue. And again, as always, reach out to our finance team, who are also on this meeting call with us today. So just by way of introduction, just saying that my finance team is with us too, and names that you all know, Nicole Roberts and Sharon and also Laverne are also here to help you and to work with you on your grant review, the application, troubleshoot, and deal with all your questions. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us for anything that comes about. And no question is inappropriate, by all means. We'd rather you ask than not. So I'm going to just flip ahead here for a second. The job titles here, we'll just kind of walk through here. Category, number, position, program managers, infant toddler teachers. Many of these will all seem familiar to you when you've done your grant budgets previously. When you did the salary portion of your grant budgets, the same format is similar, that when you're choosing one of them, just go ahead here. Ultimately, it's going to flow through here. But back to this tab, this here and the drop down will allow you to fill in whichever, except this setting for me, will provide a flow through of the information from the job title, and the data will self-populate through here. You're going to need to fill in the current rate, as I mentioned earlier, and these other bits of information. Shaded columns then are ones that you're not editing because they're flow through and they're computational, so those will just flow through the rest of your schedule again, going out to there, to that data. The pay for here, all of this again will flow through. Just going to bring it up to here. We see the 317.20. That's the amount then for teachers, infant, toddlers. Going to go back. 317.20 right there. That's flowing from there. 317.20, 342.58, 342.58. So the structure of the budget will flow the information through, pick up the appropriate lines, and then populate within the applicable section. Again, as I mentioned, and before, we've had many agencies that there may not be enough lines on this schedule. So we'll open it up for you and provide more lines in a enhanced budget form. That won't be a problem. So don't feel that you're restricted on that. I'm going to move through here to the next schedule, and then we can come back. Fringes and non-personnel expenses. So again, the 1.22% needs to be applied to any of the applicable fringe benefits that are on your grant. Those that you already have would be being increased by that. Reason being, it corresponds with the increased amount against your salaries that you'll be claiming on the COLA application. The other section then is other operating supplies and other items that here would need to be addressed. If you have additional COLA dollars then that haven't been allocated. And one of the points that we've always tried to stress through our COLA applications is that the additional remainder costs, as we'll call them, needs to be applied against an existing expense that maybe was under budgeted for your current grant period. It's not meant to capture an additional or a new expense, something that wasn't already included in your budget. But say, for instance, item X was already included in your budget and you predicted that your supply cost was going to be X amount per child and that was included in your approved budget for FY21 that is presently what you're vouchering against. You end up finding out that maybe a supplier has substantially increased an expense for one of the items that make up your supply line. That's something that you can use to increase your COLA and apply it against that line to have a valid use of remainder COLA and claim that expense on there. It has to be detailed in your budget narrative, which we'll get to in a minute too, but that's a legitimate and allowable use of the COLA. Remember again that we need to demonstrate that the use of the funds that are for existing and approved items in your budget, be they salary, fringe, or other expenses, not for new items, but for existing ones. So it's a very key important factor here, again, because the applications are reviewed in very fine detail. And if a point is raised upon review that we don't catch, if that happens, then when it's reviewed by ACF, when they're going through our budget application, they will come back to us and say, what does this agency specifically mean? So detail is very important. More is more, and more is needed, because it could prevent a lot of back and forth and questions on the back end. So just go through here. Again, all of these other expenses that are detailed out here, these are expenses you're familiar with on your current budget. So again, the same would apply to what I've just said. If you have remainder COLA, it can be applied against there, but it needs to be justified. Forms, I'll just go through them chronologically here. Forms SF424 and the SF424A, again, are flow-through items that will present your personnel budget and any of the other operating expenses that I just spoke about that will come through your budget form here. So it goes from there and it'll go to there, and the two should match. We've got a check and balance here at the bottom of the fringes and non-personnel page that shows that if there are any variances from the allocations above that, it will give you a message. So it's a little bit of a check and balance for you to see at a glance where your information is flowing and how it looks against the total budget that was provided to you for the COLA increase. The SF424, again, that form with the flow through of the information is will be signed by your board chair and your parent policy chair. Other sources of funds, this is other sources of fund used to support the program, but excuse me, but not claimed as in kind. Again, the specifics that are provided here can vary for any individual agency. I'm going to go over here to the COLA budget narrative, a very important form. Depending upon which of the programs you've denoted, that will also flow through on here. This is an extremely important schedule. Dollar amounts flow through here, and it's designed such that it'll pick up the information from the earlier schedules that we looked at. But specifically, there's sections that if they not flow through, if there's an X, for instance, or it calls for expanded text, insert rationale for providing percentage other than 1.22% increase to staff, if that was to be the case. But as we scroll through here, we see that it needs customization. Rather than, and I think this is very helpful, we took this approach a few years ago where we have a budget narrative that's integrated along with the budget schedules to provide as much flow through information as possible. But please remember that there is still a lot of specific information that needs to be included in here. And I can speak for myself when I've reviewed the applications that we've received, that not everyone, but it does happen, where lines are ignored or they're not specifically addressed. We end up having to come back to you and say, what does this mean? Or can you please explain this? Can you elaborate on this line item? So I do ask very fervently that you please read through the budget narrative, because that becomes the whole basis for the justification of the budget you submit. And if there's shortcuts or if something isn't spelled out in there, we're going to need to come back to you, and it'll just create double work for you, excuse me. And I was looking at one of the words, my mind's straight. But again, we've tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. Those that have done this before are saying, oh gosh, it's the same old thing again. Yes, that's true, but there's always changes that need to be provided and implemented, where there's specific line items here that call for text being brought in. Please be sure to write that in there. Partner agency COLA, again, we spoke to that fact of that they need to be also provided the 1.22%. Other costs, again, very detailed, and will need as specific of an explanation as you can provide, because that again is what the reviewers are looking for. They're going to ask specifically in these other costs down to an X amount per case, per item, per whichever. So it really needs to be quantified at a micro level where an outside reviewer can look at it and not know the agency, but be able to say, this is what they're claiming, and this is why they're claiming $50 more for this supply. It's because increased X amount per box or X amount per child, whatever that particular item may be. Again, I'll say more is more. We'd rather have you edit if something maybe is just needs to be trimmed, but rather than a short response to something, please provide more, because it helps us and it helps the reviewers on this. Again, more narrative there. The grantee has requested a waiver of the non-federal match associated with the COLA funds. This last form here is the COLA certification. And this again it speaks to this in our application that we've included there. Looking at this, calls for signature of the board chair, and makes a couple key points here that no staff in whole or part with grant funds are being compensated than that of current executive schedule level 2 positions, and in 2021 that was increased to 199,300. The COLA increase is retroactive to the start date of the grant, which is 12/1 of 20. And except for the employees listed below, all other staff included in the budget received a permanent increase of 1.22%. At this point, I just want to make another mention here on those of you that have the Head Start and Early Head Start grants, that we know that the present budget period you're in is starts at December 1st and runs through June 30th of 2021. So it's a 7-month budget that you're presently working with. This is something that I dealt with HHS this earlier this week, saying that, and we've received some questions on this already, saying that you supplied a 12-month budget when you completed your FY21 grant. After the grant was approved, you received a 7-month budget from DFSS, prorated through the period ending June 30th of 2021 for all of your approved expenses. And I addressed this issue with HHS this week, saying, administratively and procedurally, we are working with our delegate agencies who have a 7-month budget. And I was trying to possibly make the steps easier as we go forward with this COLA application, but I wasn't successful with that. We weren't successful at DFSS in trying to make the point of saying to HHS that we recognize in your award that you've given a 12-month COLA budget for Head Start and Early Head Start. And now I hear that you're asking our agencies then to provide a 12-month budget, which will then be trimmed against and prorated to a 7-month budget. It's double steps, and I acknowledge that. I have to say that that wasn't our first choice to go forward, in all transparency, because I know it creates additional work on the side of the delegate agencies to take that approach. We've communicated that to you as you've asked questions, but know that we at DFSS do recognize the fact that it creates a double-step procedure to the end of still awarding you a 7-month COLA that's prorated through June. We recognize that fact, and I just wanted to acknowledge that to you right now. So I'm going to move on to back to the PowerPoint, and we'll go back to there and address the next section here. So scroll back ahead. We'll talk about next. I mentioned the 2021 Wages and Fringe Survey. Survey is in an Excel file format. Separate instructions were included with the COLA funding email. Please use, when you're submitting it back, please use the naming convention agency name _ 2021 W and F Wage and Fringe Survey, month, date, and year, and then submit the completed survey in Excel format along with your application by April 2nd. So I'm going to go over to the attachment right now, the Wage and Fringe Survey. So everyone's also received the wage survey and the fringe survey. Many people have commented, they've requested this in the past year, and this is something that we wanted to actually do earlier this year, but timeframes are what they've become. Ideally, we want to push this out earlier next year, but this is where we're at right now. So we're back again doing the wage survey. As you can see, the information hopefully is self-explanatory. There's a lot in there. Again, please read through it when you're completing this. Look at all the detail that we've provided, and also again note that, and I just scroll through here, remember too that we had provided the Chicago Public School survey, the Chicago Public School schedule of salaries for teaching staff as well as non-teaching staff. Please use that too as a guide as you're going through all these positions. Granted, your agency may not have a title that corresponds exactly with what we've stated on here. As you can see, it tries to be very, very specific, but again, if there needs to be a judgment call, either reach out to us. We can share some thoughts with you on that and try to zero in. But again, it's one of those things where hopefully you can find the appropriate title and then match accordingly to your specific agency. Again here, if salaried position, convert to hourly rate, hourly salary, the annual salary divided by 2080. Rate per hour current. Ceiling rate per hour, so you're looking at somewhat over the range. Minimum education requirements, again, detailed out in as much as you can. If you need some changes to this form too, please work with us. We did provide the detailed instructions for you to walk you through this. Fringe benefits survey. I have always liked this schedule. It just makes you reflect upon your agency and see, okay, there's this provided, health insurance, vision, dental, life. Just makes you ponder for a second and just think about all the benefits that your agency has provided to the staff. Please scroll across. Number of paid leave. Do not answer yes or no. This was truncated, but leave it blank if not applicable. Again, so see that? As taken from the Chicago Learning or Early Learning standards, these were provided for you just to read through as a guide. So again, this is long overdue. We're glad we're getting it out to you. Our finance team, specifically, I'll say Nicole Roberts, did a great job of pulling this all together and making it in a user-friendly format and being able to get this out and included with our COLA application. So thank you to Nicole for getting this out so well. I'm just going to bring this up here. Reference for a second to the instructions that we provided. As we can see, there's a lot in here. I'll just scroll through that address the budget narrative, the wage study, the fringe, and then indirect cost rate. That's just part of, if you're claiming indirect costs, we discussed that also within this application. If you have an approved cost rate to use, or if you use the de minimis rate of 10%, that's also discussed here. We deal with questions, of course. If you have any, please reach out to us on that. Certifications and approvals, we'll be going through that in a little bit. Submission instructions, so it's trimmed a little bit from last year, because last year, for those that also completed this, you'll remember that we also had a quality improvement component also too with the COLA award, but that wasn't part of our agencies this year. There was a quality, but not for our particular service agencies. Wage and fringe survey. These instructions were also provided to you in the email. As a side point, please be sure to share the email and the attachments with any of your staff that are also working on it. Hopefully you've done so already with them. Speaks to the wage survey that we've looked at. So as we look at the instructions, we just see that most of these items that are discussed in the narrative are the things that I walked through on the Excel budget. So please do read them. I can't stress that enough. Please read through them, because there's a reason that these items are there. And while it's not your actual budget application, which may carry more weight as a step or as a procedure, this is as important as your budget application too, and it needs the same degree of a meticulous approach to it for all the reasons that I said earlier. And again, we could scroll through here, but you'll see that in its flow, it discusses personnel, fringes, and non-personnel, the schedules that are flow through, the attachments themselves, the wage study, the indirect cost rate that I just spoke about, and then addressing questions or submission information. So I'll move forward here. Again, questions, reach out to Nicole and myself. I, or our team We'll get back to you as soon as we can. We know time is of the essence. So now I'm going to, I think Jackie Tiamamasi, our Director of Grants, is going to walk through the governance approval schedules, and Tiffany Junkins also will join us as appropriate to expand or comment on any other items too. So Jackie, if you'd like to go from here, I'll follow through the screen as you wish.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Glenn, for that very thorough overview over our first component of the grant application. Thank you. And welcome again to everyone that was able to join us. I know there are about 73 or so of you all on this call. Again, my name is Jacqueline Tiamamasi. I'm the Director of Grants with the Department of Family and Support Services. My team supports the 7 divisions that support the city's human services infrastructure, and children's services is one of those, and thus also the Head Start grants. And for the sake of this meeting and webinar today, the COLA application. So I know you all received all of the guidance in the beginning of the week, so I'm hoping that you've had a chance to review some of those. You know, if you have any additional questions about anything Glenn has shared, there is a component of this webinar where you can post your questions. We can see that there's several questions already posted. So immediately after my presentation, both Glenn and Tiffany and I will try to answer some of those questions. And we may call on some of our other colleagues from DFSS that are also joining us, such as Nicole Roberts, who many of you all also know. So my component is discussing the governance approvals. Many of you are very familiar with this process, having submitted several Head Start, Early Head Start, partnership or expansion grants to DFSS. And so I think my goal is just to refresh everybody's memory, make sure that we're all on the same page. I think Glenn said it well when he said that we have such a short turnaround. The Office of Head Start just recently gave us our funding letter. And so we were able to quickly put together the guidance, refresh the guidance, and send it back out to you. I know one of the questions in the chat was, how different is this from last year? So it's very much similar to last year's application, with the exception of the COLA component, which I'm hoping makes it a little bit easier for many of you all. And as Glenn has highlighted, all of this is in relation to your current FY2021 budgets. And so hoping that all of that helps. And so we're trying to do our best to quickly move this application along. Glenn already, highlighted some sticking points that sometimes hold the application up. So I think one special favor we can ask of all of you, especially with a very short turnaround, is to do your best to be very, very thorough. The guidance was literally, I think, cut in half because COLA was removed. So hopefully that makes it a little easier. But make sure you're following the guidance, following the checklist, crossing your T's, dotting your I's, just so that we can eliminate needing to come back to you for corrections and edits. Also, the Office of Head Start has told us that if they find things needing editing, that's going to slow down the entire application. So with us being on a short year with Head Start and Early Head Start, we just want to facilitate, less mistakes and a more thorough quality application being submitted to Office of Head Start. So thank you so much. Thank you in advance for your support in that. So
before you go on, I just wanted to make
Yes.
one correction. The instructions themselves still have COLA in it. This is a COLA application. What's been
Yes.
removed is the quality improvement portion. So that's what makes it different from last year, is we've removed all references to QI. But this is a COLA application, so it still has the COLA instructions that you're used to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tiffany, for pointing that out. And yes, she is correct that this is the COLA. And again, the QI is the only component, which was new to us last year. So most of you all are familiar with the COLA component. And so in regards to the governance approvals, so we're just going to follow. Did somebody else make a comment? I'm sorry. Okay. thought I heard something. Okay, so in regards to the governance approvals, just wanted to highlight some key components on this slide, and that is if you have both the Head Start and Early Head Start programs, you may submit one approval package for both. The only thing we do ask is that you're very clear in highlighting that the approval language refers to both programs. On the other hand, if you have partnership and expansion, those are two separate grants, and you will need to obtain approvals for each of those separately. Also, we are also asking, and some of you have already submitted your bylaws with previous applications, but we do ask that you, again, with this application, that you do submit your full copy of both your board and parent policy committee bylaws, but that you also highlight specifically what pages document that a quorum has been met. Surprisingly, Office of Head Start does review those against some of your key approval documents to confirm that a quorum has indeed been met. And so we just want to make sure that they are referencing the most current bylaws for both your board and parent policy committees, and that the section that discusses quorum being met is highlighted. And then also, if you're obtaining electronic approvals, we also need notification of that, meaning copies of the approval emails, as well as the summary of the electronic approval process. And for many of you all, that's also in your board and policy committee bylaw. So please highlight those. Next slide. So this slide deals with tips for board and policy committee approvals. So we know that because of the very short turnaround, many of you all's regular meetings may not be coming up within the next couple of weeks or so. And we also know that many of you all have provision in your bylaws to obtain program or executive committee approval, conference call approval, electronic approval. And if none of those exist in your bylaws, then many of you all are able to call an emergency meeting. And so we will need you to obtain approval for the COLA application according to what's documented in your both your board and your policy committee bylaws. Next slide. So this slide refers to our SF-424 form. Many of you all are very familiar with this form. I think Glenn in his budget overview also highlighted this form. It is in the budget attachment A. And so we will need that signed and dated by both your board chair and your policy committee chair. And we also want you to also make sure that you're signing the final approved version of your budget. And so to facilitate this, we'll discuss this in a later slide. We staggered the application due date and also the governance document due dates. So Glenn has clearly shared that the application budget and budget narrative and associated documents are all due Friday the 2nd of April, but we're asking for your policy documents to be returned to us by April 9th. We're hoping our finance team will be reaching out as soon as possible, as soon as they've had the opportunity to review your budget documents, to give you the clearance that you are approved or to request additional information from you. Once you receive that clearance with your final budget amounts and information, we're asking you then to obtain board policy and board and policy committee approvals for your application. Next slide. Again, this is just showing you a picture of what the SF-424 looks like in case you are new to this process. I think just some quick things again to highlight here is making sure we've checked off some initial fields for you, but making sure that the correct program is checked off and that your correct budget amount is also noted on the form. Also that both your board and parent policy chairpersons have signed off on the forms, signed, dated, and titled, and also documented their full names on the forms. Next slide. Okay, so this slide deals with the COLA certification of compensation compliance, and you can refer to this on page 10 of the full COLA instructions packet. This is also located in attachment A, immediately after the tab labeled fringe and non-personnel. And this form also needs to be completed, signed, and dated and titled, but specifically by your board chair. Next slide to show a picture of the form. And so this is what this form looks like. Again, it is in your budget template documents, but what it is, it's certifying that no staff are paid in whole or in part with these grant funds are being compensated at a higher rate than the executive schedule level position, which is currently $199,300. And that, I believe, was updated just this past January. And that is a executive schedule level that the federal government sets. Also, that the COLA increase will be retroactive to the start date of this grant. And lastly, that if there are staff that are not receiving COLA for any particular reasons, that they are noted below, whether that's in whole or in part. We also want to make sure that the COLA is a permanent increase of 1.22% to your staff salaries going forward. Next slide. So this slide relates to the statement of approval that's required. And you can also find the specific instructions on page 10. Again, this is just highlighting that both your Head Start and Early Head Start grants can be combined when it comes to the approval statement, but that expansion and CCP have to be approved separately. This template is not in the budget documents. It is a part of attachment C, which was a separate Word document that accompanied the email that you received. Also, the template that we provided in attachment C needs to be placed on your agency letterhead. It also needs to be signed by your board chair and your policy committee chair. Next slide. So this is an example of what this template looks like. Again, it's attachment C3, and it's the parent policy committee and board statement of approval documentation. Next slide. Again, attachment C, parent policy committee approval form. And we're asking you to complete the prompts at the top of the document. And if, Glenn, if you advance to the next slide, we can show them what that looks like. You can find specific instructions again on page 10, but this is the document where your parent policy committee all sign the document, or their name is, if an electronic vote is taken, their name is printed. But where we have the red inserts there, we need you to complete, so inserting your agency name, and then also the number within the committee that required, so what your quorum is. So the number of signed persons on this form and what your total number is and what your quorum is. And please make sure to also date it. And I should also highlight that you will also need to make sure on the yellow section that you specify what program this relates to. Again, Head Start and Early Head Start can be combined on one, but partnership and expansion need their own separate documentation of this form. Next
Jackie,
slide.
I just wanted to add before we go on. So the policy committee, where it says has approved this grant and budget on, and it's asking for a date. This date should really coincide with your documentation at your delegate agency. So if it was a meeting, you know, whether it was a regular meeting or an emergency meeting, a call meeting, or if it was an electronic approval, whatever that is, it should all link back to the documentation that you have on file to support this approval. And so that's important, because I wouldn't want anybody just to go ahead and put a date in here, but it not be able to tie back to an actual meeting that you've had, or an executive or an electronic approval in accordance with your bylaws. So that's very important, just to make sure that this date ties back to the documentation that you have on file to show that there was a meeting where a quorum actually existed, that you got an approval.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that, Tiffany. I think the last key thing that you said was also that a quorum existed. So we will be doing a level of review before we forward these on to Office of Head Start, but we're also asking for your teams to also do similar reviews. So as Tiffany has stated, that the date is lining up with all of your policy documents that relate to the specific grant program, and even and then also that a quorum has been met, and that's very clear, not only on this document, but all your documents, and then also in your board bylaws. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this slide relates to your policy committee approval minutes. So we did not provide a specific template. It would be the agency document and the documentation that you provide to share with us that the minutes. But again, this must document discussion and approval of the FY21 COLA grant applications. And you must also highlight the programs that you receive and that are being discussed and approved at that meeting. And that if minutes are not yet approved because of the short turnaround for any particular reason, we are asking that you submit on agency letterhead stating that the minutes are pending and will be soon submitted to DFSS as final once they are approved. We also need you to highlight in the minute document if the vote occurred via conference call, via email, or another electronic voting process. So please make sure you pay attention to the specific instructions about the approval minutes on page 10 and be very thorough in your documentation about how you went about getting approval and that being documented in your minutes. Next slide. Okay, so this is similar to, so actually I should just say, so this is the PPC bylaws documenting that a quorum was met. I think I already touched on this, but here we're asking for you to submit your copies of your complete bylaws and also highlighting in your bylaws, what the number is to obtain a quorum, and then also your approval process. Next slide. And so this is the board approval form. And I think, Glenn, you can go on to the next slide. This is also an attachment C. So similar to the PPC form, this is the same exact form, same requirements, but specifically for your board of directors approval. Again, highlighting in the yellow section, you will need to adjust that to highlight what program this pertains to. You'll also need to insert your agency name and the number that this board must meet to have a quorum. Also the date, and as Tiffany highlighted earlier, making sure that this aligns with all of your board documentation about how you obtained approval for the COLA, FY21 COLA application. Next slide. So this relates to your board meeting minutes. So similar to the PPC minutes, it should be on your agency letterhead, your agency documentation. Again, highlighting that you obtained approval for the FY21 COLA. And if you do not have minutes at the time of submission of this on the 9th, we're asking that you put on your agency letterhead stating that the minutes are pending and will be submitted soon as final. And forgive me, I said that the minutes needed to be on the letterhead. I meant to say on your agency document, but on the letterhead. If you're not able to obtain approval of the minutes, provide that they are pending and will be soon submitted as final. And then also highlighting how you obtained approval, whether it's through conference call, email, or other means, and just showing evidence of that vote. Okay, next slide. So this again pertains to quorum requirements, but specifically for your board. You can see specific instructions on this in the COLA manual on page 11. And again, we're asking for you to submit your full board bylaws, even if you've submitted them in the past with other applications, and to also highlight, what your standards are around obtaining a quorum. Next slide. So this particular attachment is attachment 10 in the governance document that we shared, attachment C. So I should say attachment C10. Instructions on this are also on page 11, but this relates to documentation of delegation of board responsibilities. So if for any particular reason your agency delegates board responsibilities or authority, we're asking for you to provide copies of that policy or resolution and what those responsibilities and authorities are, and also letting us know if that's how, if that came into play with obtaining approval for the COLA. Next slide. So I think, Glenn, here you already did a very thorough job in the demonstration of the budget template, but if you don't mind, if you can pull up the governance Word document really quickly, we can share that. So again, what Glenn has pulled up is attachment C. It's our COLA governance document. This again was included in your full application packet, and we're just sharing it here so you know exactly which document to reference. And Glenn, if you can just scroll through and keep scrolling to the next page. So these relate to the attachments that I've just discussed. So attachment C3, again, which is your parent policy and board statement of approval. The yellow highlighted sections are the sections that we would need for you to edit and make sure that they're correct and that they're also on your agency or your organization's letterhead. If you can continue scrolling, Glenn. And again, this particular document needs to be signed by your parent policy committee chairperson and also your board chairperson. You can continue to scroll, Glenn. The next document again is your attachment C1. Again, the yellow, we need you to edit. Also, we need you to complete the red grayed out sections. And again, this is where your parent policy committee would print their name and sign. Okay, Glenn, keep going. And a similar document on C7 for your board of directors. Okay. So those are the attachments for attachment C, the governance documents. Okay, you can go back to the slides, Glenn. Thank you. Okay, so here we just highlight our submission instructions. Again, as shared a few minutes ago, the governance documents we've staggered. So your budget documents are due, and the associated documents with your budget documents are due April 2nd. But the governance documents, we've given you an extra week to get those pulled together. Also, after getting confirmation from our our finance team that your budget has been received, it's finalized, and it's been approved. And so we list here attachments C1 through C10. C10 does not apply to everyone, but C1 through C9, we are requesting that you complete those fully, thoroughly, make sure that they align with all the relevant documents that they need to align to, that the dates are correct, that the quorum numbers that are noted align with your bylaws, and that those are also correct, that you double check everything before you submit it to us, and these are due Friday, April 9th by 5 p.m. We're asking for you to submit them via the COLA grant app email. For those of you that cannot submit them through that email for whatever reason, we are allowing you to also hand deliver, or send us the original hard copy to our DFSS office addressed to the DFSS grants unit on our second floor. You can go to the next slide, Glenn. And also, if you have any specific questions about the governance section, section 2, we are asking for you to also submit those questions at our COLA grant app email. We will have staff monitoring the email and responding to any questions that you may have about the section 2. Next slide, Glenn. In the full COLA packet, we've also instruction packet, we've also included a checklist on page 13 that pretty much is a great tool for you to use to make sure that you're not missing any key component of the application. So we do encourage you to refer to the page 13 checklist and to use it before you submit your budget-related documents on April 2nd, and then also your governance documents on April 9th. Next slide, Glenn. Also wanted to just share contact information. So for some of our key staff, who many of you all know, so if you have any budget-related questions, please feel free to reach out to Glenn Lazon and Nicole Roberts. We do ask that you also copy the COLA grant app email, just so that we can facilitate responding to you very quickly and making sure that your question has been received. And then also, if you have any additional questions about any of the approval documents, governance documents, that you submit that through the COLA grant app email. Next slide, Glenn. So I think at this time, we have tried our best to fully cover the packet that was shared with you. And hopefully we've answered some questions as the webinar has, progressed. At this time, what we will do is we will take a look at the questions that have been posted in the question section of this webinar, and take a few of those questions, I believe maybe over the next 10 minutes or so, and answer some of the questions you have immediately. And so Glenn and Tiffany, we'll just go ahead and start with some of those questions. I'm not sure if either of you have had a chance to take a look at the questions and want to, answer anything immediately, or if you just want me to start from the beginning, the very beginning.
Yeah, it would be great for me, Jackie, if somebody can read out the question. I'm not in presenter or organizer mode, so I can't see them.
Okay, perfect. So I'll read them, and if maybe Glenn and Tiffany, if you all can help us to answer it. And I believe, Nicole, we also unmuted you so that you can also answer any questions that come up. So the first question comes from Angelica Steins, and it's, can we add indirect cost in the COLA budget?
Yeah, the answer would be yes.
Okay. She said thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Jackie, I'm having a hard time viewing the questions. I don't know why, but
okay, no worries, no worries. Okay, so
why.
I'm gonna just keep going through the questions, and actually I'm gonna go backwards, sorry. So Zuli Turner also asked an initial question, and that is, are there new steps in this COLA application? So I think versus the past, so I think we tried to cover that. Zuli, if you have any additional questions in regards to that, please feel free to add it to the question section. Okay, just making my way through the questions here.
Yeah, and just to add on, what I would also say, Jackie, is, I think Glenn mentioned during his presentation that there's always little tweaks that are made, with our instructions and things like that. So just thoroughly review that information. I think there's no major changes that we want to go ahead and call out, but there's always little minor things. Glenn talked about the detailed salaries tab, and really pay attention to those GABI function codes. They're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We want to make sure that those positions, the Gabby function code is going to line up then, correctly on the other tab that Glenn winds up demonstrating. I think that's important to always call out the Gabby function codes, which stands for, of course, the Grant Application Budget Instrument. But we want to make sure that we get that right, because that's going to dictate really the rest of the schedule.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So there's a question here that says the timeline on the COLA budget template runs through 11/30/2021. The Head Start contract we have runs through 6/30/2021. How should we deal with this discrepancy? Glenn?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, as I had mentioned. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I said, yeah, you can take that. Thank you.
That you need to present for the positions, as I'd mentioned, you need to go back and work up the COLA number for that position for the full 12-month period. That, as I had explained, where you have to state your salaries, for instance, again, for the full 12-month period, as a totally acknowledging the fact that your budget that you're invoicing on right now that was approved was a 7-month budget. But the requirement is such that HHS wants the agency to submit the application to present a full 12-month COLA for your salaries, fringes, and operating expenses. And then, so yeah, that's why I said it is double work, and there's no way around it. I recognize that. I recognize the burden of just more time involved, but we need to restate the salaries at a full 12-month period, as well as the other expenses. Compute the COLA against that, and that's what we'll use to review and submit. But ultimately, the reward, the COLA award, will be prorated back to a 7-month period, and that's just the mechanics of how we have to proceed.
Okay. So Cindy Allah also asked, who sent the email for the CPS wage? And I believe, Cindy, that came from COLA Grant app. So all of the documentation that was sent out to the delegate agencies came from our centralized email, but it came from COLA Grant app. Who do we contact if we did not receive attachment A? So attachment A should have been with, if you received some of the other key documents and didn't receive attachment A, you can contact Glenn or Nicole, and also copy our centralized COLA email. But it should have been with your complete packet. So I would say go back and double check. It was an Excel document. This COLA, okay, I think another question around the COLA budget is for 12 months. So I think you already answered that, Glenn. Our budgets were updated to, yep, 6/30, similar question. Another question, I was unable to enter the indirect cost rate on the budget. How can I get this cell unlocked? And that came from Mary Ann Morgan.
Oh, hi, Marianne. Yes, just reach out to us on an email and we'll take care of it for you if there's a problem. Please, there shouldn't be. I'm sorry for that, but please reach out to us.
Another question about what do we do if our parent policy committee isn't scheduled to meet before April 2nd to get grant approval for us to proceed in this process. So I think there's a couple steps with that. We're not asking for you to get it approved before April 2nd. We're asking for you to get your to submit your draft application to us by April 2nd, and that draft, but as final and as thorough as you can submit it. And that our finance teams will reach out to you immediately after to confirm that you're good to go. Once that happens, we're asking for you then to get your documents approved through your parent policy and boards. And if for some reason, and that's by April 9th, and if for some reason you're unable to do that, we did share that, document that on your agency letterhead. But we are hoping that your board bylaws allow for you to get special approvals in circumstances like this where the timing is It's short. So you can reference some of what I've just mentioned also in the COLA instruction manual. So hopefully that answers your question, Mark. Let's see. So someone mentioned that there was some document that showed a due date of 4/5. I think this was Toy Robertson Smith. Toy, if you don't mind, letting us know specifically what document you're referring to. The two due dates that we are going by are April 2nd. Again, that would be your budget narrative, your wage and fringe survey. And I believe your indirect cost rate agreement as well. But then your governance docs would be the April 9th date. So there's no April 5th date. It's only April 2nd, both Fridays, Friday, April 2nd and Friday, April 9th. But if you don't mind sharing with us, maybe over email or in the chat again, what document you're referring to, we'll make sure that that's corrected and information is sent out to the entire community. There's a question from Kanika. I want to do a budget revision. Should I complete the COLA application first and then submit for the budget revision? Glenn, you want to take that? There's a second question about a budget revision too. I'll just read it real quick because it goes. For a budget revision, do we include the COLA amount as a separate line on the budget?
Yeah, those are good questions that are very timely right now. So I'm going to have to unfortunately say we're going to get back to on that because I want to assess how many possibly are out there that are asking for budget revisions right now at this point in time, because we're up against really tight turnarounds right now. So Nicole Roberts and I will discuss this, and then we'll we'll respond to everyone on this in a group email, because I want to solicit how many more are thinking of budget revisions. We'll get back to you right away on this. My concern is approval and turnaround time on this. So I don't want to match like apples and oranges to something if we're not going to be able to, get a quick turnaround and approval on that. So I don't want to create double work yet. So we'll get right back to you on that. And Nicole and I will just develop our approach with the controller's office to see how we'll handle that. I don't think we'll have a problem and we will be able to do that, but let's just get back to you. Okay.
So Tiffany, I'm going to pose this one to you just to make sure we share the correct information. So it's from Angie Elman. Do we need live signatures for the PPC and board chairs, or can we get email confirmation?
So it's going to depend on what your bylaws say. So I can't answer that blanketly, but what I could say is I think for most of our delegate agencies, they do have language embedded in their policy committee and also board of directors bylaws that do speak to an electronic approval process. If that is the case, then we will go ahead and accept documentation of that approval, and also a summary, as Jackie had mentioned during the presentation, needs to accompany that as well, so we understand the items that were up for approval, and we have each individual email that actually approved electronically, if that is the case. So if there's not an in-person meeting, which we understand due to the pandemic, most people may be going an alternate route, but you can only do this if it's in accordance with what your bylaws state.
Okay, thank you for that. Cindy La has another question, and that is, and Glenn and Tiffany, anyone can chime in here. Is it a requirement that agencies apply for this?
It is. So the federal government has put out a 1.22% COLA, and all of our delegate agencies understand, based on the contracts that you guys have with us, that the Head Start program from time to time, from year to year, maybe not every year, but almost every year, we have a COLA increase. And they want to see the Head Start staff that are working to benefit, right, the children and families that we serve, that there is increased wages going to these individuals. We understand that across your agencies, there may be some difficulty in doing this. Over the years, we've encountered this where maybe you can't give it to your entire staff. And so, we've heard the excuse that I don't want to give it to some if I can't give it to all. I just ask that you kind of work with your board of directors to kind of make those determinations. But we can't have you have an excuse to decline COLA because you can't give it to everybody else. You know, this is a Head Start grant. We understand what it requires, and we have to make sure that we're not declining COLA for those types of reasons. We can't accept it. The regional office won't accept it from us, and we can't accept it from you. So I hope that clears up the question. But if anybody has any questions or are thinking about, you know, how we can get around the loophole or what have you, if you want to engage me in more conversation on this, I would just say send me an email. I would definitely like to hear from you because we're expecting 100% compliance when it comes to accepting COLA.
Okay. Glenn from Andy Navarro, COLA will be paid at the end of June.
Hi, Andy. Yeah, we will get it out literally as soon as they're approved. So that's also always one of our targets in our application when we do submit it, is that as soon as we receive the approval, we send it out immediately to everyone so that it can be vouchered appropriately. So yeah, time is of the essence. We want to get it out to you all as soon as possible, but we can't do that until we have the approval.
Got it. Marianne has a question. And Marianne, I think I would encourage you to reach out to Glenn or Nicole on this. You're asking if we want to increase the 1.22% to staff, how do we do this on the budget? So it may be about the functionality of the budget form. So if the guidance that we've provided after you review it thoroughly is not enough, feel free to reach out to Glenn or Nicole if you have any additional questions about that.
Thanks, Marianne. Oh, thank you, Jackie. Yeah, Marianne, you know, we're always here for you. So thank you for your questions. Anything you need, we'll work with you on the form.
And I think Cindy was also saying that we received the instructions for the wage survey, not the CPS comparison study. So Cindy, that came as an amendment to the original email. So I would just encourage you to go back and look up COLA Grant App, which is the heading which the email came from, you know, to find that CPS comparison study documentation. So it was sent out a second time. If you're not able to locate that, feel free to reach out to us, Glenn, Nicole, and then also copying the general email box that was provided. Someone mentioned April 2 is a holiday for us. Is there any flexibility on this date? We are so sorry. We, you know, because of such, you know, the short turnaround, we would have loved to have gotten an extension, but that was not even an option for us as a whole. So we're asking for you to stick to the April 2nd date, give it to us the day before or even sooner if you're able. And the more compliance we have, the stronger the application we have as a group. And we do need to meet that April 15th date. So we have grant activities that fall in between these due dates that we're giving to you all, and we just need 100% compliance with that. So we're sorry, we cannot extend it. Okay, my question was not for the full PPC or board, but for the document that requires the chair signatures. So I think that's from Angie. So Angie, you may have to tell specifically which document you're referring to, and then we can answer that. I know you were saying, can those be sent electronically? The separate documents that require the chair signatures, but can you point us to which specific document you're referring to? I think again, Tiffany highlighted that, you know, hopefully most of this is covered in your board bylaws, but if you give us more specifics, then we can answer it more clearly for you.
Yeah, and Jackie, and what I was going to say was, because one of those documents is the approval statement from your policy committee and your board chair. And so again, you know, if an approval was granted and they're completing the approval statement reflecting said approval, and you can't get that live signature, I think that's okay. If we wind up, again, the documentation, it has to align with what your bylaws say that you can do. And so us being able to see an email where it, if it wind up coming from that individual who is related to said body of policy committee or the board, I think it'll work. So it's just a matter of making sure that you give us enough documentation to be able to prove it up.
Got it. So that looks like that's all for the questions that were shared. I'm give you guys one more quick second there. If there's anybody who has a burning question to drop it. Question section. But then I'll also hand it over to Glenn and then Tiffany if you have any additional closing words for the group that's assembled.
Sounds good.
Mhm.
Glenn, you want to go first?
Sure. Again, thanks everyone for your attendance on our presentation. We know how time is so precious, so we appreciate your taking almost this 2-hour time frame. And of course, my thanks too to Jackie and Tiffany for your assistance with this. You know, everything we deal with you all is a constant process. Accounting, finance is a process back and forth. So please reach out to us. Our team will get back to you as soon as we can. And again, as I mentioned earlier, any question is fair game. Just send us an email, copy our COLA, the email, the general email too, so we have total trail for everything, and we get back to you, and we'll just make this a good process to work with, because we all come through for each other and we're here for you. So those are my quick concluding thoughts today on a Friday.
Thank you, Glenn. Do we have any other questions, Jackie, before I close this out?
Yeah, no additional questions, but just real quick couple of comments from me, then I'll hand it over for you to close us out. So I echo Glenn's comments, and that's, thank you again for participating in this webinar. Hopefully we're able to answer a lot of your questions. Again, we're referring you to review the materials that were sent to you. We tried our best to be very thorough in the COLA instructions, so most of your questions can be answered by just reviewing those materials very thoroughly and following the guidance that we provided. Again, feel free to reach out to Glenn and Nicole concerning the budget questions via their email, and also copy the general COLA email box. And we're just hoping that if the more thorough that you all can be, the less you'll hear from us having to go, back and forth to make any edits. And we as a group can submit a quality application, especially with the short turnaround. So thanks again, and we look forward to a quality application with all of you. Tiffany.
All right, thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Glenn. I think that this was some really good information. This is something that we have to do in order to go ahead and get the COLA application and also the wage survey completed. So we thank you for being partners with us. I just want to say I'm Tiffany Junkins, one of the managers in the Children's Services Division, and on behalf of our Deputy Commissioner, Rachel Burgess-Burnett, we're just happy that you guys chose to tune in with us today so that you can get this information. And also, hopefully, we walk you through some important steps so that we could go ahead and reduce the amount of back and forth that we do have to do. No question in this process, understand, is a crazy question. So I want you to ask your questions. We prefer for you to go ahead and ask the questions up front, as opposed to submitting something, not being quite sure, and then we have to go ahead and bounce it back your way anyway. So no question is a crazy question. Please feel free to go ahead and reach out to us. You have everyone here on this particular call and some. We're a team, and it's going to be a team effort to make sure that we get you the responses that you need. This is a timely process, and one of the things I want to make sure is that we're not holding anything up. I know that there was a question concerning a budget revision, and the grant application and the actual city budget, those are two different instruments, and I just want to make sure that that's clear. And so what you do on this grant application, we need you to move that forward, because it's not going to affect your city budget just yet. Okay, so please don't stop doing that until you hear from our finance division. We need you to move that forward regarding that grant application, because that grant application, once approved, then it folds into your city budget. Okay, but at this particular stage, it is an absolute grant application that we need to have moving, and we need your compliance in doing so to meet those targeted due dates. So on behalf of the Deputy Commissioner, Rachel Burgess-Burnett, Children's Services, our grants, and also our finance division, we just want to thank you again for spending your morning with us. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you very much.